Hello and welcome back everyone to PKIdeas for the second round of the Gold Coast Open in this new series, Tournament Reflections. And so basically this game was on the Saturday morning at 9 a.m. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please go check out the introductory video. I will include that in the description down below. And I am playing a player named Jack Shanks. Now just a bit of context, Jack Shanks is from Melbourne. When I used to live in Melbourne about 9 years ago, when I was 10, Jack and his twin brother were really good chess players, and then they fizzled out for a while, and then Jack's come back into chess from this tournament, and he's popped up here and there playing tournaments. He was a really good player, and so I understood that I shouldn't necessarily underestimate him, even though his rating was 1700 or close to 1800s. So let's look at this game. Here we have the position, and I was black in this game, so I'm just going to flip the board around. So here we go. The first move was d4 followed by f5. Now this is the Dutch, at least the start of the Dutch. And after c4 I played knight f6, knight f3, g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, g3, castles, and then bishop to g2, and then d6. Now let's get the engine going over here. In this position we see that white is slightly advantageous here, which is basically the idea of the Dutch is to give white a slight advantage in terms of having control over the center, but you got these phalanx of pawns over here, this pawn chain kind of pointing towards this central e4 square. It creates an unsymmetrical game, meaning that black has chances of attack in this position. This main idea that goes in the Dutch is to counterattack over on the king side, where white's going to be castling soon enough. And in this position, sure enough, he had castled, and then after which I followed by playing the move c6. The reason that I played c6 is because d5 is an idea for white, so the idea was to just take straight away and then play something like e6. After this move, he played rook e1 with the idea of playing e4 straight away, and I just played knight to e4. Now knight to e4 isn't necessarily a sound move, but it gets the job done in terms of stopping the opponent from playing e4. In this position, he doesn't necessarily want to take this knight over here and get a centralized pawn for me, and then this f-file is going to be open as well, which is going to be bad for him. So after knight to e4, queen to b3, all pretty normal, e6, e3, queen f6, knight to d2, and now I can't necessarily let him take on e4 because there is one pawn defending that knight, and there's two knights and a bishop attacking that knight, so I'm obviously going to be losing a pawn. So in this position, d5 was a choice that I could have played, as the engine is suggesting over here, and that leads to a more equalized game. Or you can play what I played and play knight takes d2 and bishop takes d2. In this position now he can also play e4, but if he does play e4 I can take and then also take this d4 pawn straight away. So that's the main reason why I thought that he couldn't necessarily push the e4 pawn in this position. So now knight to d7 followed by knight to e2. So he's maneuvering around his pieces and trying to get some kind of advantage. And sure enough, within the next move, I made a really silly move and managed to give him an advantage by blundering one of my pawns. So after I play rook b8, he just plays queen a6. That is a fork on the two pawns. I can only defend one pawn at a time, so I have to choose which one to defend. And obviously the one that I chose is going to be the central pawn, and I played d5. Now notice in this position also e5 was the idea the computer is suggesting. Basically when two of your pawns or pieces are attacked, when there's things going on in the board, it's always good to create more tension. The reason why is that it gives the opponent more chances to stuff up. Meaning here, if he maybe took this pawn on a7, then I may be able to get an advantage by playing something like b6 or taking this pawn. So those were the ideas in this position after playing e5. But now I played d5, and the similar idea is creating tension over here. I'm creating this tension with this pawn over here. But he just takes me and I take him. by doing e takes d5. Now e takes d5 compared to c takes d5 over here is much better, and the reason is because once you open up this c file for white, it means that he can come straight down. And notice how my bishop is not really good right now. It can't go out here, and it can't go out here either, meaning I have to move my knight, after which my rook's gonna go if he does queen takes a7, and there's problems along my queen side everywhere. After e takes d5, queen takes a7 was played, after which b6. Now notice how the queen can only go backwards, and it can't really go to any useful squares like c5 because the knight on d7 is guarding those squares. But notice also my knight here is also a bit trapped, and the reason is because my rook is currently on pre, and that's why the computer here is suggesting the idea of playing queen to d6. So b6 was played, then queen a3, bishop b7. I'm slowly developing my pieces on the queen side, b4, and now I'm just going to play b5. In this position, this seems like a really good square, and guess what piece can go there? This knight goes to b6, then to c4. That's the basic idea. So I play b5 and he plays knight f4. I play rook to a8 first. Now, following this, queen to b3, getting the queen out of the way, knight to b6, knight to d3. He's planning to go to either c5 or e5. I just play knight to c4. He plays bishop to c1 because his bishop is attacked. And now I play rook f to e8, getting my rook on this important file. Notice how if the knight moves away, then there are chances of me doing queen takes d4, or even better, moving the queen away and then doing bishop takes d4 and losing less material, or trying to gain material. Here he plays f4. f4 is a bit risky. The main reason is he's creating this really bad backward pawn. And notice in this position, I am a pawn down. And if you look at the advantage as to where white has that extra pawn, that advantage is this pawn on e3 as well as this pawn on a2. Now imagine a position, a pawn structure, when the pawn goes to c5 after me doing either bishop takes c5, or if the knight goes there, or anything like that. And the reason why this is so good is because this extra pawn that he has is completely useless because he can't create a breakthrough to try and push his pawn forward. So that wasn't necessarily a good move, and even the computer suggests that here he was plus 0.6, which means a slight advantage, to a less slight advantage, so 0.13, a 0.5 drop was there, which is evaluated by the computer. Afterwards, bishop to f8. Now if we play something like knight to c5, then I just take him, and he's forced to take b takes c5, because after d takes c5, then queen takes a1 is possible. So bishop to f8, a4, b takes a4, rook takes a4, rook takes a4, queen takes a4. Now the game has returned to a complete draw, and the main reason is because my pawn structure is much better than his. His pawns can't necessarily do anything, and he has much more backward pawns than I do. So he's got a backward pawn here on e3, he's got a backward pawn on h2, and he's got a backward isolated pawn on b4. So this pawn over here is much worse than my pawn on c6, which is stopping its momentum and moving forward. So now I just play rook to a8, chase the queen away again. So he plays queen to b3, bishop to a6, and then knight to e5. Now notice here, if I take with the knight, he's going to have a better pawn structure in terms of what attacks he can do. He can keep on pushing the pawn. Either my bishop, my queen, or my king will have to stay back and always guard the pawn. I played queen to d6, attacking this pawn over here. Notice he has no way of defending this pawn except for moving the knight back. So now you see, in this position when the knight was on e5 and the knight was on d3, we have the same position over here, except for it's my move again, and I've also gained a move. So knight to d3 was played, and I just played bishop to b5. I wanted to reopen this a file for my rook, and hence the position looks slightly better for me because I have more play along the queen side. And if you look at white's pieces right now, this bishop on g2 is useless, the rook on e1 is useless, and the bishop on c1 is useless. So every one of my pieces are moving and active. So that's another pointer in this game. Make sure that all your pieces are active. If your pieces aren't active, those pieces are as good as gone. So those are useless pieces. We have move number 30, played knight to c5, which is basically what I expected, and I played queen to b8. Remember, we were talking about this exchange before. After b takes c5, then we have that pawn structure that we talked about before. Okay, so now after knight to c5, queen to b8, bishop to b2, and then I just played rook to a7, rook a1, rook takes a1, bishop takes a1, and then I play queen to a7, bishop to b2 because the bishop was attacked, and then I played bishop to d6 just to see what he's going to play. Moves his king forward, king to f2, and then I play queen to g7. Main reason is I got this attack on. I'm pretty much forcing him to take the knight this way. And he plays queen to c3, which I reckon was a mistake on his behalf because he now forces me to just take this knight and be happy with the pawn structure that I've created. Now, queen to a7, bishop to f1. Let's just zoom through this quickly. Queen to a4, bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen to d2, stopping queen to d1. Let me get that straight. Queen to d1. Because if the queen goes to d1, queen to f1 is going to be forced checkmate. The king can't escape forward because my pawn on f5 is blocking both the g4 and the e4 squares. So queen d2, queen a2, I'm trying to squeeze my queen back to this square over here, and he does not let me budge at all. So what he plays in this position is bishop to c3. He wants to exchange queens and go for a draw. I don't necessarily want to draw in this position. I just want to keep playing and trying to push for a win. So after bishop to c3, I play queen b1, rejecting his offer. Let's say queen d1, queen e1, queen d3, king to g1, king to g7. Now I bring my king forward, bishop to a5. He's now maneuvering his bishop around, and I play king h6, trying to squeeze my king through. King f2, queen c2 check, queen d2. And in this position, queen to b1 was played by me. Queen to e1, and now I play queen to d3, bishop to b4, and we get a position where I can move my king again. King h5, h3, h6. Now I have to be careful here. In this position, he has some sort of checkmating attack over here, so I have to always make sure that my king is 100% safe. True, it's on a light square, but the lifesaver here is the queen, and the queen pretty much stops any sort of check on e2 or d1. So this was the position at move number 49. And then king to g2, he's trying to checkmate me, so I play queen to e4 check, king to f2. Now I play g5, creating an escape square on g6 for my king. Now queen d1 check, king g6, bishop to a5. He doesn't know what to do in this position and he keeps on moving his bishop. I play bishop b5, guarding this important square which stops him from bringing the queen down. Now he plays h4. In this position, he doesn't want to open up over here. In this position, after g4, bishop to b4 was played, followed by me playing h5, and then bishop to c3. Yep, so king to f6 is what I played, and now he plays bishop b4, I play king e7, and he plays bishop a5, and I play king d7, and then he plays bishop to c3. Now in this position, I wanted to open up the position and try and make a more active game, and I had this tactic of playing bishop to a4 and trying to win the pawn. So he takes me, I go check to e1, queen takes pawn, fork. Now he plays king to d1, queen to c3. Now a neat little combination happened on his behalf to force a draw. Queen to a7, king to e6, and now he plays queen to h4 again. Now I'm pretty much forced to keep on checking him, because if I take this pawn on g3 over here, he's going to take my pawn on c6, next is going to be my pawn on d5, and then it's going to be my pawn on f5, and then h5. So all those pawns are going to go all in a row if I waste a move instead of checking him. I play queen d3 check, followed by king to c1, queen to f1, king to d2, queen to f1 to f2, king to d1, and then I play king to f7. Notice here that if he takes my pawn, now I have the same thing that he had. I can pretty much afford to take this pawn, check him again, and then take this pawn. So all these moves are possible, and it's just a matter of fact of who's going to give up the position and the perpetual checks first. So after king to f7, he plays queen to a7, king to g6, queen to a4, again queen to f1, king d2, queen g2, king f1, queen g1, king d2, check, check, and check, and then we just agreed on a draw. So now in this position we see that in terms of pawn structure, I managed to pull back in the game after losing a free pawn. The first motto to learn from this is to never give up in your chess games, because once you give up on a chess game, it means that you have pretty much given up on taking the initiative, trying to find an attack, and trying to find some way to equalize the position. So making mistakes is natural. Everyone does it. Even grandmasters do it. But it's basically how you come back from those mistakes during the game is what's important. Pawn structure is always important, and it can sometimes win you games and it can sometimes lose you games. If you have just imagine the same position if this pawn was on e5. Who do you reckon the position is going to be better for there? In that position, it's going to be obviously your white's advantage, and the main reason is I can't afford to bring my king over here like I did in the game, because once I do that, he's going to start pushing the pawn and my king can't come back over here because my own pawn on g6 is stopping me from doing that. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, enjoyed the video, comment on the video if you have anything for me to improve on or work on, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and press the notifications bell. So with that being said, thank you, and I'll see you next time for the third round, which started at about 2 o'clock at the Gold Coast Open. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.